You know what pleases me? It pleases me greatly that at the end of this last episode of Goblin Slayer, there was a Season 2 announcement. Now, there wasn't a release date reveal. For instance, we don't know if it's going to come out in 2019, 2020, 2024. We don't really have a release date yet for Goblin Slayer Season 2. And honestly, I don't know how far the original source content is compared to the anime. For all I know, the anime might have adapted almost up to where the manga or light novel is, and there might not be enough content to really adapt into a Season 2. So I really have no idea. But the point is, though, is that Goblin Slayer has received a Season 2. And like I said, that pleases me, because I think everybody by now, if you have stuck from episode 1 to this episode that came out today of Goblin Slayer, I think we're all in agreement that Goblin Slayer is easily one of the best series of Fall of Anime 2018, and probably at the very least in the top 10 or top 5 of the best anime for this year of anime. It's been a high-quality series. Yes, it's had some CGI here and there with Goblin Slayer, and I know many like to point that out and say it's ugly, but then I think back to Overlord, and I'm like, you're thinking CGI of what you're seeing in Goblin Slayer is bad, you clearly haven't watched Overlord. But jokes aside, though, Goblin Slayer isn't a perfect series, by any means, but I have to say that it has definitely been very consistent from start to finish. The only thing it really hasn't been consistent with, if I had to actually admit something, is that the first episode is kind of like a lie. It really is. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but let's get into everything else, okay? So this is the finale, the final episode of Goblin Slayer, and it sucks that it's finally here. I mean, yes, like I said, there's a Season 2 announcement, but we don't really know what's going to come out, so it could be months to years until we see a continuation in anime form, but at the very least, we can breathe easy and know that it's coming, unlike what limbo we're in currently with ReZero, if we're ever going to get a Season 2 or not. But okay, this finale of Goblin Slayer is probably one of the best ways, I think, to conclude the story. Even if we never got a Season 2, I would be satisfied with this final episode, and let me explain the reason. Goblin Slayer is the name of the series, obviously, and it's pretty self-explanatory of what the series is about. I mean, the man slays goblins. And it's been stated since the very beginning that him being a Goblin Slayer, taking down goblins, there's no end. And I went in depth saying that he has a really horrible job. Everybody has jobs that they don't like and has no fulfillment, but they do it because it has to be done. And like I said, that's what Goblin Slayer has. And his job really doesn't have an end. Like, when you think about normal adventurers and quests and stuff, adventurers go out to destroy the Demon King, defeat the Demon King, defeat the greatest evil, and save the world. That's usually an objective most heroes have, or most characters in a story have. But Goblin Slayer is not like that. His story, or at the very least what he's doing in the world, there is no end in sight. Because goblins will always be around. Until literally he exterminates the entire race, they will continue to come back. And we have seen that they spawn like rabbits. Honestly, it's going to be insanely difficult to probably eradicate the entirety of the goblin species. So, Goblin Slayer is never going to have an ending. He's never going to be able to stop taking down goblins until the day he potentially retires/dies, and then the next generation takes his place. So Goblin Slayer, we knew from the very beginning that we were not going to get an end to his conflict. For instance, him taking out all the goblins. I think it's unrealistic to think that he was going to be able to do that, because when you think about it, and what's been established since the first few episodes, we knew the goblins were never going to be able to get wiped out. So, getting into that main point, and the reason why I say this finale is a good conclusion, is because it never really was about Goblin Slayer eradicating all the goblins. It was about Goblin Slayer finding his humanity, or will to live, finding a reason to continue moving forward, finding something to protect, finding something that gives him passion, something that, makes him happy. And see, the entire time he's been, slaying goblins, Goblin Slayer hasn't been doing that because he loves to do it. He's doing it because he's the only one that is doing it, and he knows the horrors of goblins, so he is taking them out. But nobody else is really willing to do it. He's been by himself for a very long time, and so he's just doing the job. He's taking it upon himself to do it. And he's never really been doing this out of sheer happiness. He's only really been doing it out of just anger and wrath. Everything that's happened to him in his past, he's been, directing his anger, his hatred towards the goblins. It shows a side that we really haven't got to see. We saw a side of Goblin Slayer where he actually has fulfillment, or he's happy. I mean, let's look at the final segment of the episode when Priestess is talking with Goblin Slayer. And, she's like, why? Like, why didn't you put up a quest? Like, why didn't you do that? It's like, you think, people would have accepted it. I mean, and when you look at what everybody said and all that in the last episode, it makes sense why the Priestess would say that. But he's like, well, my village had a quest up, but it was never saved. And look what happened. He's like, my village was doomed. And so Goblin Slayer was always under the impression that nobody would ever really want to do it or save people. And he underestimated how many people really cared about him or noticed how hard he was working. And it shows that him putting himself out there, having this just endless raft to take down goblins, has gotten a lot of people to pay attention to him. I mean, he's even aware that he's called a weirdo. He even admits that to the priestess, which is kind of sad, but he's very self-aware of his own problems. But he is someone that's been so diligent. Taking down goblins, people has paid close attention to him, noticing his struggle. And they know that he has something that is deep within him that he's trying to deal with himself. And seeing how he's like, my village was never saved, but then everybody pops up, he's just in absolute shock. He literally left everything to chance, luck, because, with his village wasn't lucky. That's basically what he said. My village, they just didn't have luck on their side. They didn't have all the stars to align for them to be saved, and that's what happened. He's like, I didn't have my tactics, my quick wit, or anything like that. I had to rely on sheer luck, which kind of goes along with everything that's already been established in Goblin Slayer and kind of what his character's about in the first place. I mean, let's look at the final message of this episode, the finale of Goblin Slayer Season 1. It states that Goblin Slayer doesn't allow the dice to roll. He doesn't like that. He doesn't allow dice to roll. And if you know anything about D&D, even though I haven't played much of it or anything, like I haven't seen much of it, D&D is still technically about luck and dice rolling. And if you're slinging a dice, you gotta hope for like a certain number to land on for you to be able to accomplish something. In this case, Goblin Slayer is never allowed luck to decide anything. He's never allowed luck to be the determining factor to why he can overcome a problem or not. And that is why he's managed to make it this far. But for the first time, since every option was gone, unavailable to him, and he had no other choice, he allowed the gods to decide his fate. Allowed them to throw the dice to decide if he lives or he dies. And that's kind of the main message here. Goblin Slayer allowed the game master or the players to take control of him to figure out what his fate most likely would be. The fate of him was out of his hands. He no longer had control whatsoever. And that's what the significance of that was when he said it was all about luck. And then the final passage of this episode saying he did not let the gods ever roll the dice. That's the point. The only reason why he survived, what was also stated, if we want to look at this from a game perspective, is that because of just how unique he is, even though he's an average person that will really never accomplish anything, he just stands out a little bit, and people just want to help him. He's favored a little bit, and so obviously the gods threw the dice, and they saved him. And that's the interesting part about the story, that it was just downright pure luck to how he got saved in the first place and how the village got saved. It's interesting. It's a really interesting viewpoint on the story and how Goblin Slayer actually came out on top, but how he had to break his own rule to be able to win in the end. But okay, let's talk about his happiness and stuff. So, Goblin Slayer, he truly reached a state of happiness, and I think he finally now has light in his eyes. We've known for a while he's pretty much been clouded in darkness. He's had nothing in his future. He's just been taking down goblins left and right. And it's a man that basically has no ambition. He doesn't really want to do anything. And we see how he states in this episode he wants to become an adventurer. And this is a good sign. It shows that the man wants to continue living. He wants to seek out happiness, his own fulfillment, instead of just, taking down goblins day after day. He does want to see an end in sight and be able to do something that's his passion, his dream. And I appreciate that. I love seeing, Goblin Slayer waking up and actually wanting to do what he always wanted to do when he was a child. And he's not letting the horrors of his past control him and weigh him down. He's trying to move forward step by step. And this is kind of the main part of what's happening here in this finale, is that he's finally taken many steps forward to be able to change as a person, to be able to become a better man, to be able to become human again, instead of just being this monster that's driven by wrath. So yeah, I think Goblin Slayer had a very good story. I love the character-driven story of Goblin Slayer. I know many might not like this series as much as I have, and many might not be able to just really appreciate the writing that went into Goblin Slayer's character, but I personally enjoyed it. I love character-driven stories. It's one of the reasons why I love Berserk so much, just seeing how Guts changes throughout the start to where he's at right now in the manga. I've always loved stories like that, and just seeing Goblin Slayer slowly change and open up as a person is just amazing to me. Now, let's talk about the, lie of the first episode before I wrap up this video. So, yes, Goblin Slayer has been very violent. Oh my, yes. I mean, even this episode shows a lot of violence. But I feel like just how dark the first episode got, honestly, I think the main purpose of that was literally just to scare people off. If you just don't want a dark fantasy, they wanted to scare you off, or the writer wanted to scare you off, because when you think about all the episodes after that, it's never really been as extreme as that first episode was. But I guess, in a way, what that episode was also trying to show is what happens if Goblin Slayer wasn't around. If someone wasn't like Goblin Slayer taking down goblins, stuff like that would happen so much more. So, I mean, I guess it fits in with the theme, but just the first episode really does kind of go to extreme measures compared to everything else afterwards, because it never really gets that crazy. Yes, we had meat shields in the last episode, and we saw glimpses in this episode how bad it got, but even then, it wasn't to the extreme, point of view level that we saw in the first episode, and it's just interesting how the writer actually did that and how they animated it as well. But that's about it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, how you felt about this finale of Goblin Slayer. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Did you really want to watch season 2 now after finishing this? Do you want to watch it? Be honest in the comments below. I'm curious. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click that bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.